This is Doug Cook. I use he, him pronouns. I live on what once was Pawtucket land, currently known as South Hamilton, Massachusetts, in the Ipswich River watershed. I'm the Education Events Coordinator for Nova Mass, and I'll be your host for tonight. Along with me is Rafi, who is an intern and studies at Greenfield Community College. And welcome to Happy Healthy Chickens with Kirby Lecy. First, I'd like to thank all of the Nova Mass staff and board members who have helped to make this workshop possible. Also, we'd like to thank our sponsors. Chelsea Green Publishing, an employee-owned company, brings in-depth practical content about organic gardening and more to life with books, ebooks, and audiobooks. Go to chelseagreen.com and enter code PWEB35 at checkout to receive a special Nova Mass Resilient Garden Series discount on your next book purchase. Chelsea Green Publishing, cultivating change from the ground up. As well, Ward's Nursery. They pride themselves on being a leader in offering horticultural products you can count on, knowledgeable staff you can trust, and friendly customer service. Ward's Nursery and Garden Center, where gardeners grow, located in Great Barrington, Massachusetts. And most importantly, we want to thank you, the viewers and listeners, especially our members who make our education and advocacy work possible. Please consider becoming a member or making a donation to support our important work. Before we start every event, we want to use this map to help remind us to take a moment and locate ourselves and consider learning more about the history of Indigenous people who once resided and managed the land where we are living, and also to learn about their present-day political structures, issues, and goals. We also suggest you learn more about the ongoing history of Black exclusion from property and farmland ownership. Please consider making solidarity work with local Black and Indigenous groups a part of your environmental and land-based work. We owe so much of what we know about how to grow food and manage land in a way that is regenerative and ecologically responsible to not only the people who were here before colonization, but the people who were brought to the United States as slaves. And rather than erase them, we should honor them and support them and seek justice for their descendants who have survived centuries of oppression and white supremacy. We'll drop some links into the chat for a few organizations where you can learn more, follow, and support their work. So with that, I'd like to take a little moment to acknowledge and express my gratitude to you all for sharing this space together. And I encourage you to focus on your breath and feel the connection with your body and the place that you're in. And it's now my pleasure to introduce Kirby Lecy.
Great, thank you
Thank you.
so much. All right, so hello, and I just want to first say thank you so much, Nova, for having me to talk about chickens again. I am always just so thrilled to collaborate in any way, shape, or form with your organization and the amazing work that you're doing across the state and with your regional partners and just such a wide network of folks. I think the thing I enjoy most about this is the connections I get to make with all of you. And so even though we're in a virtual space, I really encourage folks to ask questions as we're going along. You know, as Doug said, they're going to be monitoring the chat so that they can interject and stop me from babbling, because I could babble for hours about chickens, and to really kind of connect around stuff. And if I don't get to something or something pops up after the fact, there's going to be my contact information dropped in at the end so that you are able to get in touch with me. And I'd love to just chat about anything to do with chickens. And I've had folks in some of these previous presentations, you know, follow up about all kinds of different things. And when we're in space together, it's often easier for us to like share different things. So I'd also welcome folks, if I'm talking about an area or something that you want to share something about, put that in the chat for folks to be able to see as well, because that's part of what I grow off of, is that I'm always learning. And I think as I go through my presentation today, you'll learn that in the last 6 years that I've been on this property that I'm on, which is where most of this kind of like these pictures and design elements are from, things have adjusted, and these were all designed off of things from previous properties. And so a lot of it kind of rolls together. So just a little bit about who I am. So I'm Kirby Lecy, and I am the owner of J&K Good Time Farm. in Ashburnham, Mass. In my day work outside of the farm, I work for the State Office of Rural Health. So I am very plugged into kind of rural needs and advocacy. I've been working in kind of food system spaces and health and human service for 15 plus years. And I'm just really passionate about all of the wonderful things that come with rural life, and having this small piece of land to cultivate. And I just feel incredibly blessed in a lot of ways. And I think even more so in the last year with the pandemic. I work in public health. That's where the State Office of Rural Health is within DPH. And so it has been just a really nice space to be able to kind of decompress at the end of the day. And so my pitch to you today, as we kind of go through this, we're going to be talking about a lot of different things with chickens and different areas with chickens, but they have provided a lot of stress relief for me, I think. And I didn't realize how much they provide that for me in my life until I kind of had the last year to reflect on that a little bit. So we're going to jump in. We're going to run through some housing, feed, caring, healthy pieces, diseases, roosters, all kinds of different things. And I know that there may be some folks who have been to one of my presentations before, or maybe you haven't seen anything before. I always update stuff, so hopefully there'll be some new things for you to pick up on. I'm also going to, I think, go a little bit faster through some of the first parts of my presentation today. There's going to be some follow-up links that you can link to around some of the pieces that are in there, so that we can get to some of the stuff that's later in the presentation that always gets jammed at the end because I've blathered too much at the beginning. So that's going to be my strategy for today. Hopefully I'll stick to it so that we can get there, and we'll dive right in. So why chickens? Oh gosh, there's so many things I can say about chickens in general and keeping poultry. But I do think that they're probably one of the most versatile things that you can keep on a small homestead in a backyard setting. And I think for me today, like, if there's one thing that you take away from this today and in me talking to you, is that there is no right or wrong. I am not there's a single school of thought for anything. It's about finding what works for you, what works for your setup, for your style. There are definitely things that hopefully you'll take away today as tips and some concepts to think about and how you might apply those in your own backyard if you're just starting with chickens, or if you already have chickens and are looking to maybe improve some of your systems or utilize your chickens in a different way. But at the end of the day, I'm not here to quote unquote shame anybody around the way that you keep chickens or what you're doing with your chickens. I just want to celebrate them in lots of great ways. And so we're going to talk a little bit about some of these things on the screen today. In addition, I'd love to hear about what they provide for you in your world, and if you have them, and if you don't, what you're most excited about in engaging in possibly getting some chickens. The one thing I will say in starting off with all of this is that you can never be too prepared in some ways, and the more research that you can do, the better around a number of different pieces that we're going to cover today. The first off, though, is really making sure that your municipality, wherever you are, allows you to have poultry. That is probably the first thing, specifically if you're in a more backyard setting. So there are varying laws and different information that I'm happy to kind of help noodle through or pass along to you after the fact if you have questions around this. But before you go out and get yourself a flock of little baby chicks in your house, you want to make sure that you're going to be able to put them somewhere on your property, because although house chickens are kind of fun, they're very dusty and messy, and I don't know that you're going to want to keep them there forever, but who knows? No judgment if that's where you want them to be. But I just want to say that there's so much information out there. You can use your Google finger till the cows come home on all kinds of different thoughts and DIY and different pieces around keeping chickens. But really, it's trying to find the information that's most helpful to you. And I'm still old school. There's a bunch of great books that are out there. Your library probably has some on hand as well. And talking to other folks that have had chickens before, like we're going to do today, is also really helpful in kind of setting you up for success as you are moving through all of this. So without further ado, I'm kind of bump into housing around chickens. And so this is the area that I'm going to kind of breeze through a little bit fast. And that is because I prepared a little YouTube tour 2 days ago. And I think the kind of cool part about this, so we're going to drop a link into the chat and you'll be able to look at that after the fact. And I think we'll also try and like post that in my slides so that you can link to it in my slides after we share those as well. And the nice piece of that is you're going to be able to kind of see what I'm talking about in real size and scale. It also has a tour of some of our smaller mobile coops that we use with some of our other poultry, whereas most of the pictures I have here are just in our larger area. And the other nice thing is, like, these pictures that I have in here are from when we first built our coop 6 years ago. It looks a little different today. Mostly it's covered in a lot more poop and dust than in these pretty pictures here. So you'll get a real-time understanding of what it actually looks like after you've had chickens in a space for a number of years. I love all of these beautiful Instagram accounts with these beautiful coops that folks keep, and they must do a lot of cleaning to keep them there. Or maybe you all can drop some tips to me about how not to have poop on my walls, but that is a reality of chicken housing and life. So the first thing I want to talk about is just around size and scale. So obviously here we have a small farm. I keep a larger flock of chickens. But that being said, even in a smaller backyard setting, a lot of the different pieces that I'm going to talk about right now are things that you can think about incorporating into any size that you're doing. And so even though we're at a large scale, and obviously, as I say in my tour that I do as well, this coop was designed to also look nice in our landscape because of kind of where it is placed. There is a number of different things that you can kind of do based on your budget, your scale, your size, etc. The one thing that I will say across the board is really thinking about your coop and how you're going to access from the outside into your coop, especially if it's small, in terms of being able to clean your coop, to access your eggs. If you've got a chicken that is in distress or needs help, how are you going to get your body into this place that they exist? Because I'll tell you, I've seen a lot of coop designs, and especially in the smaller coop world, where it's not easy to be able to kind of maneuver and get in there. And so the more that you can provide yourself larger doors for clean out and access, the better. You'll see here, there's this large door on the side, and this is actually where we have our, what I call our poop trays, which I'll talk about a little bit later as well. And this is where the majority of our droppings from our chickens land, because it's where their roosts are, it's where they sleep, it's where they poop all day long, all night long, I should say. And so this is the area that we are easy to pull out and clean once a week because it gets built up. In addition, we have a door in our coop, and obviously our coop is full size, so I can walk in and move around. And in our little video, you'll see some information about that as well. We have access from the outside to our nesting boxes, so I don't have to go inside my coop to be able to collect my eggs. Some people make these so that they are external, in the sense that this would be a box that kind of jets off of the side of the coop. and that helps save some square footage inside. So if you need some extra square footage and you've got a smaller coop and you want to keep more chickens, that could be a great way. We didn't need to do that, and so this worked out better because I wanted to be able to put a rocker on my porch of my chicken coop, which may sound ridiculous, but it's what I like to do because I want to have a glass of wine and watch my chickens at the end of the day. And so this was the design that worked for me. Predator proofing is huge, and I think you'll hear me talk about this a lot. You don't want to be on the defensive. So thinking about your design in terms of all of the different kinds of critters and creatures that could access your coop. We utilize, as you can see here, dug down into the ground, poultry netting for our run, which you'll see pictures of in just a bit, that the chickens are in. We actually have hardware cloth because it's a little bit thicker and they're a little more exposed. This floor of our coop that you can kind of see here with the studs, those we have also put hardware cloth down so that any sort of rodents or other smaller critters that get underneath and through this poultry wire also can't get up through the floor of our coop either. Wherever there is a weakness, people will find it. It's a hungry world out there, and your chickens' food and your chickens as food are very, very tasty to many things. And so thinking about that and trying to be proactive, I think, is probably the biggest tip I could give today. We designed our coop in ways that are probably a little overboard, but I will also say we have had zero problems with predators getting into our coop. And in fact, we have only had problems with predators twice. Once being a hawk, which I'll talk about in some of our run design, and once was with a fox, and that was a me problem because I forgot to close the coop door at dusk, and Mr. Fox must have had his like spidey senses up and came through. But if you have a well-designed coop and safe areas for your birds to be, the better, because what ends up happening is, like, if you're trying to always play the defense, like they get in one area, once they know that there's access there, they are going to do everything they can to try and get into that area. So you can see here on the right hand side is those poop trays that I had discussed, and so they pull out from underneath our roosts. So you can see in the top left hand corner, this is how our roosts started out. So this is where our chickens spend their evenings. They get all snuggled up in there together and snooze away. And we started with these really great natural sticks that I had gotten from out in our property and was like, oh, this is awesome. They're comfortable on there. And that was a really great idea until we had some pest problems with mites. And because of the porous nature of the branches, the mites were able to really kind of drill in and live in them. And so we learned our lesson there and said, oh, well, this probably isn't the best way to go. And not that mites couldn't also get into regular boards, but the boards are easier for us to kind of clean and treat with diatomaceous earth and some of the other sprays and things that we're using, which I will also talk about in a little bit. The other thing about the kind of 2x4s in this design, which is in the bottom left-hand corner of the screen, also is that the chickens are able to really flatten their feet better on this. So in the winter time, when they are trying to warm themselves, so they use their feet as kind of like these little radiators, and they tuck them into their bodies so that their bodies can help warm their feet and circulate that heat through their body. It allows them to be able to do that easier than on some of these other boards. And so these were kind of some of the things that we just like learned as we were going along and observing and paying attention to what was happening with our birds. All right, so the other thing we utilize in our coop, which is really cost effective and amazing, is whitewash. And so whitewash is something that was used for very many uses many moons ago, before we got into like all kinds of paint products. So whitewash is using agricultural lime, so you want to make sure that you have the right type of lime, so hydrated lime. And some of the limes that you're using, like in your gardens, is not what we're talking about. So it's really around making sure that you have agricultural lime. And the great thing about this is you use this crushed limestone with some water, and some people use salt in it as well to help give some abrasive qualities to it so that it can stick to things. But it is a great alternative to paint for a couple of reasons. One, it's cheap. So you can get a bag that will last you for eons, and share it with your neighbors and friends who also have chickens in their world or other livestock. It's not toxic to your birds. So if they peck at it and eat at it, because I will tell you, your chickens will peck at everything. They're going to check things out. They're like toddlers. They want to put things in their mouth and see what they are, or like a puppy. So it's not toxic to them. But the great thing about it is that lime is caustic. And so it also helps with keeping any bug and mite populations down, because the acidity that's kind of in there doesn't allow them to nest and burrow as much. And it also keeps mildew from growing in your coop. So if you have some moisture building up and things like that, it stops that. And so they used to use it for whitewashing farmhouses. There we go, whitewashing fences for keeping the mildew from growing and from the wood rotting. And so you can use this within your coops to help keep them happy, healthy, and fresh. We kind of do every other year. So every year I always do kind of the floor after we do our big spring clean out. I re-slop down the whitewash onto the floor. And then every other year, I kind of do the rest of the surfaces because they don't get as heavily tracked on, used, because you'll see it starts to chip off. And you'll notice in the video, it's not as white and pretty as it looks right here in this photo. The other thing I will say about this, please, please, please make sure you don't have exposed skin. You should have some eye coverings, that kind of stuff, because lime is caustic. If it gets on your skin and it sits there for a bit, it can burn you. But once it dries on there, it's completely safe and good to go. And you can Google this. There's a ton of folks out there that are utilizing this. And it's just, I think, a really great, cheap, economical way to help keep your coop healthy, clean, and good to go. Using all kinds of ventilation is critical no matter what size your coop is. And we'll talk too a little bit about heat and heat lamps as I get a little further on. But right now, my big point is just making sure that you have ridge vents and side vents. Chickens produce a lot of moisture with both their feces and trucking mud and other things into your coop. And so you want to make sure that you're keeping ventilation, so all of the ammonia and other kinds of smells that come out of their waste is able to really move and get out of there. And so also that things aren't getting wet and trapped inside. If you had a coop that was all insulated and completely trapped up, it would be a stinky, wet, disgusting mess very fast. And so it's kind of a misconception because we're trying to keep our birds like warm because we have really cold winters around here. And we'll get into that a little bit too about breeds that sometimes are more helpful around this. But really, we want to have nice airflow, and that doesn't mean drafts. It doesn't mean having like wide open windows, but it does mean having kind of these vents and different areas for air to flow through. In addition, we have a lot of storage in our coop because it's nice to have things close and to not have to haul them when you've got things popping up. So we have this closet that is built in that's got a number of things in it that I will talk about in a little bit. And then as you can see, we have lots of windows and natural light. We have this large window that you can see kind of on the right-hand side of the picture. And I just noticed there's my dad on top of the coop in this photo. Hello, Dad on top of the coop. I didn't even notice. I've had this photo in this presentation for years and never saw that before. So there's this large window that is southern facing to help with bringing in natural light to warm things up, especially in the winter time. And also because chickens' laying schedule is very dependent on how much light they are receiving. So if you've got a coop that has no natural light and it's cold and it's blustery and you're keeping them, more locked down inside, you may never get eggs, which is one of the great things about chickens, is this great source of protein. So we're going to talk a little bit about outside stuff. So as I said, I'm running through some of this. We'll post that YouTube link so that you can kind of see the full tour of the coops, and you'll get a full scale and size of things. And I go through a lot of this stuff in there as well. So for fencing, as I talked about before, in our outdoor run area, there is this hardware cloth that we utilize around the bottom of our coop. And it is to help with predators from the outside. And I will say this, so free range chickens is a wonderful thing. And we range our chickens in a lot of different ways using electric netting. However, as I mentioned before, it is a hungry world out there. And if you have your chickens roaming about without protection around them and or above them, eventually something is going to find them to munch on. That is just kind of an inevitable factor in all of this. And so I really encourage folks to think about how you can provide some safe area for your chickens, especially in case it's a day where you notice there are more predators kind of plunking around, or you've had more interest. Being able to kind of lock your girls down in a safe area is important. And so we have a decent size, because we have a decent number of chickens. We have a decent size enclosed run that is attached to our coop. From that enclosed run, we have a door that pops open that we can utilize to let them out into open areas. However, they always have access to get back inside that enclosed run. We have a number of things that help kind of signal our girls if there's something amiss. We have our dog and geese, we have ourselves, we'll shout and yell. And they have kind of this natural alarming system where our rooster will crow and get everyone back inside the enclosed area. I don't know how they know that it's enclosed and safe in there, but they do. And so if you are going to have chickens in any sort of a free ranging setup, it's so important that you've got a place that they can go that is enclosed and covered in case they encounter predators, especially hawks. So if you've got just electric netting, but no boards or things. So sometimes if you're ranging birds out in electric netting, even just by putting some plywood A-frame structures out, those kinds of things, anywhere your chickens can get under to try and get away from predators is going to help them in the long run. You'll see here with our enclosed run, hardware cloth is a little bit expensive, so we utilized it on the bottom part of our coop where predators might dig, because we knew that extra protection was more important there. And then utilized just some regular welded wire for the remainder of our coop because it's a little bit larger. And that way, if there were larger predators trying to crawl in, it helps stop them there. And so it's kind of this nice balance of us saving a few bucks because it would be thousands of dollars to do the size run that we have, all in hardware cloth. And eggs are good business, but not quite that good. So we like to try and think about how to protect without going too overboard. And so that has really worked for us. So as I mentioned before, the poultry netting for us has been huge. It's about an investment, and I'm trying to think of what recent prices were. So I would say for under $300, probably between more like $200 and $250, you can get a good setup with an energizer and electric netting. And if this is something that you're going to be serious about and you really want to range chickens, it is worth the investment to save up to try and get yourself some electric netting. It just is a protection and a block against coyotes and foxes. And I've seen, I can't even tell you how many things, including our own dogs, put their nose against that fence, get a zap, and then they're gone. And it's just a deterrent, and it helps in a lot of different ways. And overall, I would just say that at the end of the day, because especially we have chickens for providing sustenance to our community with their eggs, it's important for us to make sure that they are safe, because it takes 16 weeks for me to raise a baby chick to the point where it starts laying eggs. And that's a lot of investment of my time, my energy, my love, my feed, all of these different things, to then have some coyote come sneaking in and steal a bunch of chickens. So for us, this is a really smart investment. And I would really encourage folks, if you're going to get into this, to think about how you're going to keep your birds protected and safe. And I like the electric netting because it's easy to move. I can pick it up and move it about. It is easier with two folks, but you can do it with a single person. And it's really versatile. And because it's got really straight spikes that go into the ground here in Ashburnham, we like to say that we farm on rocks, which we have a very ledgy, rocky soil and land. It's easy for me to kind of get those stakes in, especially because I can use a quick drill bit to just drill into the ground where those stakes are going to go in to break up some of those rocks if they're in the way as well. So I just put that out there as an option. It's something that a lot of farmers use, but sometimes I don't think backyard folks think about this, but it is a great investment in the long run. All right, I'm going to pause for a second. Doug, are there questions around this kind of housing, fencing, that end of things before we get into the next chunks?
There are a few questions. KJ asked if you recommend a certain height for the enclosed run.
So it's really, again, it's this whole idea of like, what are you comfortable getting into? So if you have a really like low height for your enclosed run and it's like longer and bigger, think about your body having to get in there and clean things out. So that's my big thing to you. And so maybe it's smaller and it's shorter, but you've got a whole end of it that opens up so you can get a rake in there. Great. Your chickens are going to like to have a little bit of space to move and flap and move around. So if they're only going to be in their enclosed run, I'd give them at least 5 feet or so that they've got some room to stretch out and to do what they love to do, and roost and fly about.
And then another question came up about how deep your trench is that you're burying your wire versus, and someone asked if there was like, some folks will do what they call like an apron where they lay maybe 2 feet of wire or mesh out, along the outside to keep things from digging under. Can you talk about, why you might choose one over the other?
Yeah, so we dug ours about a foot down. When I say about, because again, we're here in Rocky Ashburnham, and so it's not always ideal. Yes, so some people do more of an apron. We chose not to do that because we also put the hardware cloth on the bottom of our coop. So this kind of dug in netting was an extra line of protection. So again, I would just kind of think about, especially if your coop is going to move, not going to move. There's a lot of kind of considerations around this. And so you might have something that is easier to kind of only a few inches down. If you've got a coop that you're going to move a couple times a year, if you're moving your coop all the time, you might just want to have netting underneath your coop to keep it safe and protected without anything going into the side of the ground. But there is no real preference. I just say, whatever you're doing, make sure it's not your only line of defense. You want to think about multiple ways to kind of keep folks out. And keep dropping your questions into the chat because I am happy to dig in. And the other thing too is like, I am not the end all be all expert on anything. So if there's things like I said before that pop those in the chat for folks to be able to hear what you've done. And if there's something that I don't know something about, I can also send out some feelers to some of my other chicken people in the world and try and get back to you as well. So we're going to talk a little bit about feeding our flock. So we're going to get into feeds and then breeds. And overall, the big thing that I just want to say about feeding your chickens is to make sure that you are informed and educated about your feed and what is in it, and that you are personally comfortable with that. And what you feed your flock is going to very much impact the flavor and nutrient contents of your eggs. Just like we know with everything else in our world, we are very interconnected. And so the healthier that you can keep your birds, the better your egg quality is going to be. And you will see a difference there. And I say that wholeheartedly because we have folks that won't eat anybody's eggs but our eggs. And I don't think that we're doing anything real special over here. It's just that our chickens have access to high quality feed, lots of really nutrient dense snacks, and we allow them to free range in our woods with lots of bugs and grubs and all kinds of things. And so there's also a number of folks that are concerned about different things that are in feed. So doing your research and your homework is great. NOFA has a great list on their website. I think you still have it there, Doug, hopefully, of different feed providers in this kind of region. And we utilize Green Mountain Feeds and Pool and Grain. So those are two of the folks that we feel comfortable with. They're in Vermont. They answer the phone, they talk to you. And so for me, it's just important to know what's in my food for my chickens and what they're eating. And so, as I said, we also make sure that they get their nutrient levels. So you have to imagine that, especially in the winter time, chickens are relying directly on this grain when our landscape gets very frosted and cold. And so that time of year is not the time for us to skimp on anything. Like there's times here and there, if I've run out of feed and I haven't gotten my order in yet, I might stop and pick a bag up somewhere to get us through. But I won't do that in the winter because this is their only nutrient source. And I will say our chickens also are really wonderful scrap converters in the sense that for us here on our small farm, a lot of the quote unquote waste that we have from harvesting and leaves falling off of, lettuce heads and all of the different things, that goes to our chickens so that they have a really diverse diet in that way. They also get all the scraps from our kitchen for them to be able to eat. And we had pigs for the last year, and I kept joking that the chickens were like, hey man, like why are they getting all the goods now? And so we make sure that they just have a lot of options. Another thing to think about is that your chickens need calcium to help build their shells. And so if they, especially in the wintertime, are not able to dig into Mother Earth and nutrients and all kinds of things to get that, feeding them oyster shells and or feeding them their eggshells back to them, crushed up, is a really great way for them to rebuild some of those nutrients. If you're going to do the eggshell route, you do want to pop those eggshells. So we have a big bowl that we keep on our counter, and every couple of weeks I toss them onto a sheet pan. I put them in the oven at 250 for about 15 minutes. That helps kill any bacteria that is on the eggs that could possibly be a problem moving forward. And we feed that back to our chickens to help with calcium. There are a zillion blog posts, infographics, etc., on what not to feed chickens. Here's my probably not popular 2 cents on this. Don't read this stuff. It can make you crazy at the end of the day. Chickens are not as bird-brained as we think. Most of the time, if they shouldn't be eating it, they don't. There are some things to think about staying away from. Citruses, onion-based things, those are stuff that we steer clear from. You can Google with things to make sure that they are safe for chickens, but there's a lot of folks that are like, I don't let my chickens eat apple seeds because the arsenic levels in them. And could there be some truth to this? Certainly. I haven't had any trouble with my birds in this. I haven't had a bird yet die from eating something other than a large mouse that got stuck in its crop, which is a story for another day. But overall, don't stress yourselves out about this. I hear so many people, it's probably the number one question I get in these all the time is like, oh, can I feed them this? And can I snack them this? And can I go ahead and do a Google search if it's going to make you feel better, but don't beat yourself up over this and get too crazy about it, because most of these things have great nutrients to help feed your flock. And if you want to learn more, you can totally Google, and there's a lot of really opinionated bloggy articles out there that will make you feel terrible about anything you do with your birds. They do really need access, though, to food and grain and different things so that they are able to get well-rounded nutrients. And you'll see, look at how beautiful and shiny these feeders and waterers are in this picture. So one trick that we have learned, so chickens are messy. Oh my gosh, are they messy? Oh my gosh, do they waste? There's a million kind of DIY articles out there with all these kind of contraptions to help catch the food waste that they will peck at because they scatter the feed everywhere. And you're like, I just spent all this money on this really nice organic grain, and now they're scattering it and it's in their poop. And oh my goodness. Two things that we found that really helps is keeping their dishes raised up and not as accessible for them to like get up and get into. So you can see on the left here, we've got rocks that we brought in from outside to just kind of pile up and keep the food and the water up. We have a little bit redesigned this. And so on the right-hand side is what our feeder looks like today. And so you'll see this is actually a plastic like plant pot turned upside down. So the other thing that chickens will do, they are gonna roost on everything. Anything that's flat that they can get on, they wanna jump up and just be on it. If it sits, it fits. It's kind of like that whole, like if there's a cat and there's a box, like they're gonna do it. That's what chickens do. And so anything you can do to help keep surfaces pointy or less friendly to roost on, the better. And here you'll see we're doing that for a while. Like literally I just had a jug, like a milk jug full of water that I would put on top of this, which kept them off of it. But then it was really annoying to like take the water jug off and pull the plant pot off and dump that feed in. So we took just a plastic pipe, and put it into this so that we can scoop the feed directly in. I don't have to worry about navigating all of that, and it makes life much easier, and the chickens don't roost on it. So that's been one way that we've kind of navigated some of that. You'll also need to make sure in the winter time with your water, so chickens need access to water all the time. So if you are ranging your chickens outside, if you have a separate area that they're going into, it is really important that they have water. They drink a lot. They especially drink a lot when it is cold outside, which is a little bit obnoxious for you, especially if you don't have a water heater, and you don't have to have an electric water heater. So you'll see on the left here, we use just the pan heaters in the coop to help keep their water not frozen. But outside, we utilize these rubber kind of indestructible, you can pick them up at most of the farm supply stores. I think they're technically for horses, but they're great because one, they're kind of flexible. So like in the early season when it's cold outside, I can kick my boot into this without like breaking this bowl to break up the water if I need to. And the one other tip that I got years ago from someone, and it's an amazing tip, is to put a ping pong ball on top of the water because it helps move the surface tension. And so when we're not in absolute below zero frigid, everything freeze water, it allows that ping pong ball to move as the air moves. And also your chickens are going to peck at it because they think it's kind of fun. And moving that surface tension keeps your water from freezing. So it's a great way to not have to have an electric. You could do the same thing inside your coop. And so in the wintertime, if you don't have some way to keep your water from freezing, you're just going to have to make sure that you've got some sort of a routine set up to give your water to your chickens twice a day so that they've got access to that before it freezes. But these are two of the ways that we've kind of navigated that. Some folks like to use like the chicken nipple waterers that come out that have like the little drink cups. Those are great and effective. They're not great in the winter always because they freeze up and have some of the same issues, but they allow folks to have more water so you can, fill a larger pail or bucket over a longer period of time if you're not going to be home to be able to check on water for them. All right, so the other thing that is kind of a low budget, easy thing that we do with snacking our chickens. So we feed our chickens out of the kind of regular feeders. But when we snack our chickens, although it's really lovely to think about like feed the birds like Mary Poppins and scattering lots of scratch all over the ground, it also attracts a lot of rodents and pests when your birds don't get all of the little scraps picked up. And so we noticed that when we were doing this, there would be these little like bits of stuff that the chickens would leave behind. And inevitably rodents were coming in, and rodents bring disease, and disease is not always great. And so we were like, gosh, how can we try and not have this happen? And they sell lots of these kind of feeders for, especially when you're doing meat chickens, which we use these for our meat chickens as well. But they're expensive, the metal ones. And so we fabricated some plastic gutters. It may be kind of hard to see here, but basically it's a plastic gutter, and we plopped it into kind of two pieces of scrap wood. And we have another one that we've just literally screwed into two pieces of wood on the end. They're great. They're easy to clean. They help keep the feed off of the ground. It allows the snack to be spread out so that the chickens aren't fighting over it quite as much, because the pecking order is a real thing, and chickens can kind of be nasty to one another sometimes. So we try and alleviate any squabbles and fights the best we can. And so these are some of the tips that I have around those pieces. And I'm going to move into breeds and caring for chicks, but I'll pause for a second, Doug, in case there's any questions from that last section.
Yeah, I think some folks were interested if you could say if, should the feed and water be inside the coop all the time, or in and out, or do you depending on the seasons, does it change? Could you speak to that?
Yeah, so for us, we do both in and out, but that's also because we have a large flock. And so one of the things I worry about sometimes is because of the pecking order, we have some chicks that if you're watching inside the coop, don't often get access to the feeder because some of the more bossy girls might keep them away from it. And so by having both food inside and outside, it allows for a little bit more access in that way. With a smaller flock, I may not worry about it as much as long as you're keeping an eye on your birds and seeing what's happening. Food inside the coop is preferable in some ways because, as I said before, they're messy. And so as to what I talked about before with like things scattering, oftentimes if you have, we keep a very low amount of feed. So we have a feeder outside, but I don't fill it because if I fill it, they're going to scatter it everywhere, and that's going to attract rodents and other things. And wild birds really love to come in and eat feed as well. And so we try and limit that because wild birds also carry lots of mites and disease and other things that we're going to talk about in just a minute. And those things can be very dangerous for your birds. So preferably, I would say inside just to kind of cut down on that stuff. But we do a combination here.
Mm-hmm. And then one quick question, what is the heat source for the pan heater?
So that is electrified, so you do have to plug that in. So if you don't have electricity in your coop, which if you're in a smaller situation, you may not, and there's just a small element in there, and it's got a thermostat that regulates, so it knows when the temperature drops, and it just radiates enough heat to keep that water from freezing. They're really kind of great if you have electricity, but if you don't, utilizing some of the larger pans with the ping pong balls is more than fine, and just trekking some water out a couple times a day when it's really cold.
Great, thanks.
No problem. All right, so we're going to get into breeds of chickens and caring for chicks. So this is probably the thing that I'm most passionate about around keeping chickens, and something I hope you'll think about too when you're thinking about your chickens in your flock. A mixed flock, I think, is preferable in a lot of ways. I think diversity helps with a lot of different things. Chickens lay at different times of the year, so depending on the breed, you may have a breed that lays better when it's hot out. You may have a breed that lays better when it's cold out. You may have a breed that has a better response under certain types of stress. And so when you have all of these different breeds all in one flock, it helps kind of keep constant egg laying throughout the year. Again, it helps manage disease. So different birds may be susceptible to different things. So we learned that our Brahma chickens, although they're beautiful and wonderful with their fuzzy feet, also are a little bit more susceptible to scaly leg mites because they have feathers that can pick them up really easy off of the ground. But even though our Brahmas had scaly leg mites, it was easy for us to kind of get rid of those in the rest of our flock. And then it also helps provide some genetic diversity in your flock. If you were going to think about hatching out your own chicks at any point, it's kind of fun to be able to have chicks that are able to mix, and it's kind of where you see a lot of these kind of nouveau breeds of like my brain's not working. The olive eggers, like olive eggers and those kinds of chickens that are coming out today. Those are mostly from these kind of weird crosses of diverse flocks. You want to do some research around breeds to make sure that they are able to be cold hardy, but also so that they are able to withstand some of our warmer temperatures. So we live in an area where we've got these extremes. So we really make sure that we keep birds that can kind of handle both ends of the spectrum. And although there's all these like really kind of fun, cool, fancy birds out there with their big combs and wattles, and they're beautiful looking, those birds oftentimes don't bode well in our sub-zero temperatures in the winter, and are more susceptible to things like frostbite. So it's important to do some research around chickens, and there's so much information about different breeds out there. So finding breeds that are going to be good for you is important. For us, we also raise heritage birds here. We prefer them for their kind of sturdy nature and their ability to really forage. But the kind of downside is that they are not as productive laying eggs. And that may sound counterproductive to you since we are a farm. But for me, the ability to kind of move these standard heritage breeds of chickens forward and to keep those genetics running is more important to me than an extra 30 eggs a year. And so you need to really think about what you want your chickens for and what you're looking for in them and moving your birds forward. So the last thing I'll say is temperament. This may sound really kind of wacky if you don't have chickens or have not encountered chickens. They do have different temperaments and personalities, and some of that is related to breed. And you can absolutely find that information in doing some research as well. So if you are looking to have a couple of backyard hens that you want to be able to handle and hold and all of these other things, it's so important for you to make sure that they will do that. So as I said, one of the big things that I can say about raising birds and chicks is the more that you handle them from a young age, the easier it's going to be as they get older. And why might you want to handle birds when they're older? Well, if you've got disease problems or you have predators coming in or you need to move your birds, having birds that are comfortable being handled, it doesn't mean that these birds are necessarily going to want to come running over to you and hug you, although sometimes there's birds that are really friendly and enjoy doing that kind of stuff. But it just makes it a lot easier for you to help work with and manage your flock. Here is a picture of our brooder, one of our brooders, I should say. In our tour, you'll notice I talk about a backside of our coop, which we have. We do a lot of our brooding in there now just because we're doing larger numbers. But there are all kinds of different ways that you can brood your baby chicks when they come. A couple of important things to remember, I think, around brooding baby chicks is they need heat. So you will need some sort of a heat source. You can use a heat lamp. There's also a number of heaters these days that they like sit up a couple inches off of the ground. They're a little less fire hazardy for folks. They're a little more expensive, but they're a nice option if you're worried about setting shavings on fire in your house. And it's also a matter of like where you're going to keep this as well. Chicks produce tons of dust because the thing that they like to do in all of these shavings is to scratch about. So like putting this next to like your kitchen table or your TV may not be the best spot because it's going to be covered in this thin, fine dust every day, no matter how much you dust. So although I like to have my chickens in an area where I'm frequenting so that they get used to me and hear me and see me and I can pick them up, I also like to make sure that they're not in an area that's going to get disgusting. We designed this brooder here specifically because I wanted a way, so you'll see in the front, these two little panels pull out so I can kind of clean them just like our poop trays outside. So I was like, how do I make this inside? And we have two separate ones, and this thing at the top, this piece of corrugated plastic that we have, I can put down the middle, so I can scoot everyone to one side, put that piece of corrugated plastic in the middle, clean out the one side, put fresh shavings back in, and then move them to the other side and clean out the other side on that. You'll see that I've got all this cardboard up and around the open areas because it's important for them to have ventilation, but chicks also can't have drafts on them. So it's important to make sure that you cut that down, and then as they get older and feather out, you can remove some of the drafty areas. You can use a plastic tub. That's what I started with many, many moons ago. And it's just kind of about finding what works for you and what's good for your setup. Your chicks are also going to need access to food and water, but you want to make sure that you are using actual feeders and waterers for baby chicks because chicks also have a tendency to be a little stumbly. They look a little drunk sometimes and pass out, and they can oftentimes get themselves into waterers and fall into them and get wet and get chilled, and so that's not good. So small waterers and feeders to start as they kind of grow is important. The other piece that I will say here is as they grow, it's important to make sure that you expand. So this is the backside of our coop that I was talking about that we do a lot of our brooding in. It's where our chicks go as they start to get a little bit older. And then the nice thing about this is I'm able to let them out. So this run that they're in is with the big chickens, but I have a divider so that I can slowly kind of introduce our small birds with our big birds. If you toss young chickens in with your adult birds, if you're introducing some new members, it is not going to go well most times because chickens do have a pecking order. They are going to try and assert this, and they can sometimes even kill some of the smaller chicks. So it's important to kind of do slow introductions so everyone can get used to one another and that we're not just tossing everyone together and expecting them to get along. So again, handling your birds as they get older. So you'll see here as a picture of in the middle of one of our roosters that we had, my favorite rooster. He was so sweet. He was so sweet because I handled him a lot. And I'm a firm believer in, if you have a bird that you think is going to be a rooster, to make sure that you are handling him as much as possible. And this is my pitch. You need to have a plan for roosters. If you are in a space or an area that cannot have roosters, especially, you need to have a plan, because although they try and do sexing of birds that you are getting, your little baby chicks, that is not foolproof. And inevitably, one of these times you are going to end up with a rooster, and there are way too many roosters trying to be sold on Craigslist, given away, etc. So you want to think about that ahead of time. If you were to get a rooster, are you able to keep him? Where might you be able to move him to? Or are you going to stew him? And I don't mean to say that I love my chickens, but I also can only have so many roosters in my flock. And that's the other thing to understand, is that you really should only have so many roosters to hens for a number of reasons. One is that your roosters may not all get along. There can be a lot of dominance structures happening between those roosters. Sometimes that works, sometimes that doesn't. The other thing is that roosters' main job is to go out and to breed those chickens. And if you have too many roosters and not enough hens, they are going to create what's called rooster tracks on your ladies' backs, and it can really open them up and not be pretty if they're getting overmated by your roosters. You'll see here, I had too many roosters at one point and didn't have a plan. And I ended up making these crazy little chicken saddles to go on my chickens, which was fine for a little bit, but inevitably Vlad over here on the right-hand side, that beautiful blue coochie chicken, he had to go somewhere else because I had 3 birds that were mating, and he was the lowest man on the totem pole, and he was getting beat up by the other roosters. So have a plan for your roosters. All right. Care, this kind of just rolls into a little bit of our chicks here, and into just general care for chickens and keeping them healthy and happy. Dust baths are so important for your chickens. It's their natural way for them to be able to keep their feathers and their skin free of all kinds of different parasites, including mites. We use diatomaceous earth here as a way to naturally combat some of that. So we put that into their sandboxes that we create for them. So here's the thing. You can create dust baths for your chickens, or your chickens are going to create dust baths for themselves. They will dig and find themselves space to be able to do this behavior. It's innate, it's natural for them, it's healthy for them. So we like to try and give them space to do so, where we can include some diatomaceous earth, which is crushed up tiny microscopic shells that help break through the exoskeletons of mites and other kinds of bugs, and it dries them out. When you are using diatomaceous earth, you should be wearing a mask so that you're not breathing that in. It's not healthy and safe for lungs. You should not be using huge amounts of it. Little goes a long way, but it's a really great, easy way to kind of help with cutting down on mites. Here's my thing. There are a lot of folks out there who are really into natural chicken keeping, myself included. We do everything we can to try and keep our birds happy and healthy without having to use nasty chemicals or pesticides or other things. And there's a lot of folks out there who'll be like, well, you're never going to get mites if you do X or Y or Z. And I hate to break it to you, but unless you are able to keep your birds secure from outside, they are at some point going to be at risk for getting mites or other creepy crawlies, because those creepy crawlies live on wild birds, and wild birds fly around everywhere. And are going to interact with your flock at some point, whether that's just because they've been in the litter area that your birds are about to go into, etc. So doing these kind of preventative measures to help keep your flock healthy is fantastic. And there have been times that I have had to treat my birds with a mite killer, because my birds were going to die otherwise because they had such a heavy load of mites. And that's not a failure. Please don't ever feel like you failed if something like that happens. It's just part of kind of the natural cycle of this. And I think anybody here that's ever had chickens for a long period of time knows you're going to come across a lot of different things. And we're going to talk about some of those in just a second too. So that's just my general kind of like, don't beat yourself up. I do everything I can to try and keep my birds happy and healthy naturally. And sometimes that just doesn't work. We utilize outside of our poop tray, so that's our kind of weekly clean out. In the rest of our coop, we utilize what's called the deep litter method. And so we do this with a mixture of shavings and sometimes straw, depending on what's been going on with bugs and mites and things in our coop. We start with a good bedding of 3 to 4 inches. And then as our chickens poop, we add more shavings. So it's kind of like we're allowing this natural composting process to happen in the coop. With the deep litter method, you don't want to smell ammonia ever. And if you start to smell ammonia, you need to dump it out and start again. I will also say that it has been ever challenging the last couple of seasons with the deep litter method through the winter because we've had these incredibly weird spikes in temperature that are happening. And that can make it a little bit difficult when we have a really big warm up and everything kind of like defrosts and freezes and gets wet and mucky. This spring has probably been the only spring in a number of years that we've been able to go all the way through the winter without having to kind of toss out midway. But it's a great, easy way to kind of keep maintenance low. So yes, we have the weekly poop trays that we're cleaning out, but this allows us to kind of keep the rest of our stuff in the coop for twice a year. You can Google about the deep litter method. There's a ton of articles out there about it. And then the big thing for us with this is twice a year we clean it out. We shovel it out that door, which you'll see in that tour of the chicken coop video if you want to watch that as well. We shovel it out that onto a tarp. I drag it over to my compost and let it compost in. The other thing too is that you can even utilize that kind of half composted hot compost coming out of your coop on things like asparagus or other high nitrogen things that aren't afraid of being burnt out. So that's always great too. It's important for your chickens to have lots of roosts and ways to kind of get up off of the ground, especially in the winter time. So like we range our chickens outside. Our chickens love to be outside in the winter, but as we talked about before, their feet are really where they regulate their heat. So they like to get up off of frozen surfaces. So we utilize a lot of natural stumps and sticks and things inside our run, outside of the run for them to be able to kind of get up off of the ground, get away from another chicken if they're bothering them. And it's important though with these kind of natural stumps and things, you got to rotate them out. Don't put them there and leave them there for long periods of time, because just like we talked about with the inside sticks, if you have pests and mites and that kind of stuff, they can get onto them. So we usually change ours out twice a year unless we've had an issue happening. So as I discussed before around heat, so I'm here to tell you, you do not need supplemental heat in your coop. And also, if you are going to have supplemental heat in your coop, if you've got some sort of fancy chickens that can't handle some of the more lower temperatures, it's important to know that if the power goes out, those birds could be at risk and you may need to bring them inside. Because birds naturally regulate with the seasons and temperatures. And so if they are hanging out in a really cold day under this heat lamp and it's nice ambient temperatures of 60 degrees because you've got that in there, and then boom, your electricity goes out and it drops to -20, it's really hard for your birds to be able to regulate around that. So we do not use any supplemental heat in our coop in the winter time. Our girls, and I will also say the deep litter method helps in kind of helping create and generate some heat, because you may know that compost, as it's composting, creates natural heat as well. They're great at regulating themselves. One thing we do sometimes when we have really low dips in temperature especially with like some of our roosters that have bigger combs and wattles. We'll take Vaseline and just put a thin layer of Vaseline to kind of help protect against frostbite for them. The other thing, we do utilize a little bit of supplemental light in our coop. So I mentioned before that chickens are very much tuned into the cycles of light and need a minimum of 12, 14 to 16 is much better hours of light to stimulate the reproductive system for them to lay eggs. And so for us, because our birds are here and we love them, but they're here also to provide eggs and sustenance to our community. We use supplemental light in the winter time to help stimulate some of their laying. I do give them time off though. We do not use supplemental light during the months that they are molting. And so this is another thing that if you've never had chickens, it's this horrible thing that you all of a sudden learn in the first year when you think, oh my gosh, what's wrong with my chickens? They start losing all of their feathers. Chickens go through a molting process, typically in the fall into sometimes early winter. And during that time period, they are putting a lot of energy into regrowing new feathers as part of their natural cycle. And so when that starts to happen with our birds, I cut back the light a little bit so that they are able to rest and recoup and get strong. I also feed a lot of extra protein to them during that time period, whether it's mealworms or other kind of hearty snacks to help them with rebuilding their feathers. So a couple of other things that we do around kind of helping keeping our chickens happy and healthy naturally. Apple cider vinegar, garlic, and honey are your friend. I utilize them in our waterers here on a kind of semi-regular basis. When you're using apple cider vinegar, you want to make sure that you're using real apple cider vinegar. So either ones that you've gotten from like Bragg's, from your health food store. You want to make sure that it's got all of the good kind of nutrients in it that's going to help your chickens. It helps with boosting their immune system. Honey is really great because it's kind of like electrolytes. So you'll see those like Save a Chick packages that they have or they give you when you go get your chicks at the store. That's electrolytes, it's sugar. It helps kind of boost their systems. Honey can do the same thing. Garlic also is just really great for keeping all of their systems happy and healthy as well. So I usually take like a couple of cloves of garlic, I crush them up with like a little bloop. I wish I could be more specific to you with what I do, but I do a little bloop of apple cider vinegar into their 2-gallon water and some honey for them to be able to drink. Once a month is pretty good for that. And then I utilize it if I have any health issues happening in the flock to help kind of boost things as well. We also put a lot of herbs in their nesting boxes and in their snacks for them to be able to eat. And also, I don't know, I like the way herbs smell around me. So I feel like maybe my chickens like it when it's in their boxes to help keep them de-stressed. But they do eat at them and they have a lot of really wonderful things in them to help them out that way as well. In addition to the diatomaceous earth that I mentioned before. So I'm going to roll real quick right now because I got one last little blip to do and then I will take all the questions. So the last thing on my agenda for this evening is just to talk about diseases, and I talked a little bit around them. You should have a care kit. If you're going to have chickens, prep yourself. There's nothing worse than having an issue pop up with your chicken and it's a weird time of the day, or you can't get out of the house, or does Tractor Supply open at what time? Is my feed store open at what time for you to be able to go get things? So for us, we have a kit that's got some pretty easy things in them. We've got Blue Coat, which is a really great antifungal spray that also has a coloring in it. So chickens, if they see red and blood, they often peck at it. And so the blue helps kind of stop other chickens from pecking at your chicken if they've got an open wound. And keep gloves on hand and petroleum jelly. neem oil. We keep some of those electrolyte packages. So even though I use my honey and everything, if I'm in an emergent situation and there's something going on, I want it quick and easy so that I can grab it, make it, and have it happen. I don't want to have to go in the house and like find my honey and warm it up and do all of that. We keep a bucket with all of this stuff in it, along with some towels. And it's also important to have some space for your chickens to be isolated should they need to be pulled away from the flock if they're sick or they're not feeling well. There are a number of things that you can encounter with your chickens. And I've encountered a lot of them. And nobody told me 15 years ago that when I was keeping chickens, I might have to grease up my finger and push in a prolapse anus on my chicken when she had one fall out. And so these are some of the things that I think, not to scare you in any way, shape, or form. And this is not like things that are happening on the daily or usual occurrences, but they are things that we've encountered along the way. And so having some understanding of some of the diseases and things that can happen to your chickens ahead of time so that you can identify them is important. The biggest thing is I keep eyes on my chickens so that I can see them daily. And oftentimes you can notice a bird if they're having issues. A lot of times they'll be fluffed out. They may not be as active. They may not be eating as well. And they can encounter a lot of things, whether that's mite loads. They could have thrush, which is this upper left picture, which basically is just kind of like a bacterial infection that happens and they need to have some cleaning. Scaly leg mites, which I talked about before, right down here in this left-hand corner, that's my Brahma's foot, filled with scaly leg mites. Farva, which is like the chicken version of ringworm, is on the bottom right-hand side. They also can get egg bound sometimes, and that can be a real dire situation that can turn bad fast. So a couple of things. There are a number of forums online for people who are able to help you navigate this stuff. But at the end of the day, you need to have a plan. If you are going to have chickens, just like any other animal, you need to know what your limits are, what you're willing to do. If you are someone who is going to be very attached to these animals, then you should find yourself a poultry vet, an avian vet that you are going to be able to take your birds to. If not, then you need to have a plan on how you're going to handle a sick bird, and whether you need to put that bird down because its life is not going to be nice staying alive any longer. And so I just want to be real with you in the terms that you don't want to be thinking about this stuff when it happens. You want to think about it before time so you have a plan in place. And the last piece I will kind of say about this, we utilize our chickens for a lot of different things. They are great protein source. As I said before, you can see our eggs are on the right compared to grocery store ones on the left. If you feed your chickens, they're going to have lots of high nutrients in their eggs and healthy protein for you, your family, your community. We utilize them to flip our compost over. They're great at kind of turning over their own poop piles because I'm not great at managing my compost piles always. They help me clean out areas that we have had crops in previously. They help clear land. So the picture on the left and the picture on the right are the same area. We've had chickens in this area for about 5 years. They're really great at kind of scratching and clearing up areas that you have. We utilize them to help cut down on pests. So these are our apple trees. We put them under our apple trees a couple times a year to help cut down on the pests that are there. And then we compost everything that comes out of them into beautiful, rich nutrient soil that we can put back into our gardens. We've had some upgrades. So I have an automatic poultry door that we picked up on Craigslist, which is wonderful, which is a fail-safe when I don't close the door so that foxes don't get in the hen house. We still close the outside door every night. It's just kind of a backup for us. And we also have a camera that we've put in our coop, which is a nice way for me to check in on things when I was not working from home, to be able to see what was going on. But those are really kind of fancy forward things there. This is my contact information, which I know Doug's going to put in the chat in a minute, and then we'll take some questions as well. I've been doing these cocktail hours with Farmer Kirby, so you can check those out. You can pop onto one and ask questions about chickens. We just talk about all kinds of different fun things. So I put that out there as a space that you can come and pick my brain if you want, or share your own things. I'd love to hear about them, and you can contact me through any of these ways, and I'll stop babbling and answer some questions if they're out there.
Excellent, thank you. Yeah, we do have some questions. So in a 10 minutes or so, we'll try and get through as many as we can. I think we'll start with some of the specific ones. Could you mention again your light regime? When are you using the lights, and for what times of the day, for how long?
Yep, so I have an automatic timer. I try and light my chickens for 14 hours a day. And so this is the thing, I always forget. And then I have egg production drop off and I go, why are my chickens not laying? And then I go, oh, you haven't adjusted the light. So I really do it kind of around when we do our time change. That is the most important time to do it. You can play around and kind of figure out where you want to extend your seasons at and to increase that. But really, when we're having less than 12 hours of daylight, there should be some additional light for them. You also want to put that light on so that it's extending in the morning, not at the night, because chickens do not see well in the dark. And so there's nothing worse than having a light click off and then they don't know where to go. They all just pile on top of each other. So you want to start your light earlier in the day and let them naturally kind of roost and go in on their own.
Mm-hmm. And then to speak somewhat to that management, someone asked if they were just, they wanted to leave for a weekend, for example. What are some of the things you do recommend for that?
So one of the big things I would say, if you're going to get chickens and you vacation and you do other things, get friendly with your neighbors who may be interested in helping out with your birds. They are like a dog in the sense that they're not like cats. You can't just leave them. You can't just fill up their food and their water. I mean, I guess you could try it, but I wouldn't recommend it. So it's important to make sure that you've got somebody there that can put their food and their water. It's pretty low maintenance, but like for us here, I have to say we're in a beautiful situation. We have multi-generational living going on. So my parents live in an in-law apartment in our barn. And so between the four of us, it makes an easy lift on this. So if you've got family close by or a neighbor, and that's the other thing, is that if you're just keeping chickens for yourself, oftentimes you're going to have way more eggs than you need. And so going in on it with a neighborhood friend, a person that you trust can be helpful, and managing the workload of chickens, which is minimal, but there's some heft there. And like, you can't just not be home at dusk to close the door, because if you're not, something could happen. And so things like the electric poultry door can help with that, but they don't completely make up for that. So it is definitely something, if you're someone that's not home a whole lot, chickens may not be the best farm pet for you.
Thank you. And another question, you mentioned the eggshells, and I believe, some folks are also asking about other supplements we might throw in there. Are you, chopping those into very small pieces, or are you just scattering it around? Could you say how you might, give out your supplements?
Yes, so I use a rolling pin to bust them up very, very small. And you can put them in with feed or other scratch. There's a number of other supplements that are out there. Agrodynamics does a number of great stuff. There's a couple of really great folks out there that are producing herbs and other things. We try and naturally do that here with how we feed our birds, but if you want a fast, easy way, there's a lot of products that are out there. But yes, we keep them small. I usually feed them at snack time or in a separate snack feeder, so that they're excited and they really eat them and get them down and in. If you put them in their regular food bowls, they might be interested, but sometimes they're not always going to be excited to check it out.
Mm-hmm. And then someone asked about, when they're building their coop and their run is going to be put on a slab. Would you recommend covering that with dirt or wood chips or something else?
Yeah, I mean, anything that is easier for you to be able to kind of clean up and harness that poop. So if you just have a slab, not that there's anything wrong with that, you could hose it down, but you're losing all of the poop and other things that they're putting down that you could be composting. So using shavings or anything like that as a bedding on that area would be great, because then you're going to have like a kickstart on your compost. And if you're like hosing stuff down too, it's also important to think about where you're putting your chicken coop. Like you don't want to contaminate water sources that are around you. So thinking about placement of where things are going, if you're hosing things down, where is that runoff going to, etc. So you want to be good to your neighbors and your watershed around you as well.
Mm-hmm. Great, thank you. And another question, sort of specifically, was from Tim, who said that his or their chicks are in their basement at the moment, 6 weeks old, and wondering when should they go outside.
So you want to make sure that your birds are completely feathered out. And so you'll notice that your chicks are going to start to lose their downy, fluffy, beautiful little cute feathers and turn into these gangly, amazing, awkward teenagers at about 4-ish weeks. You really want to make sure that they've got very minimal downy feathers left on them. And you want to slowly kind of introduce them into the elements. You don't want to drop the little birds out into frigid temperatures unless they are birds that have been hatched out from a mom. So that's the other great thing. Like, so we have to do all this work to like keep chicks at the temperature they need to be. You want to slowly reduce that heat lamp and then take it off so that they're just in the ambient temperature, like in your house, and then slowly introduce them outside on some warm days. But mama birds take care of all of this like in the dead of winter, like it's nothing, and we have to really fuss around it. So sometimes it's fun to let them hatch out their own chicks if you can, if you got a scale like that as well, although you don't get to hold them as much, but that's a whole other thing. But yeah, you can start that now. I'm sure that it depends by the breed, because different breeds grow at different rates. So it's really around when their heads get feathered in and they've got no more downy feathers.
Great, thank you.
Great question, though.
And another great question from Mary. If you feed them eggshells, will it encourage them to eat their own eggs?
There's a lot of folks that say that that can happen. I have not seen that to be true. And here's the reality is that if you've got an egg-eating chicken, they're eating eggs because sometimes they're not getting nutrients that they need elsewhere. Sometimes they're just dinks, but if you've got a chicken that's eating eggs, oftentimes you can kind of curb that by using wooden eggs or ceramic eggs in the nest boxes to discourage that behavior, and or finding out who that egg muncher is and putting them in a quarantine pen for a couple of days to discourage that behavior and kind of reset the pecking order sometimes. But I haven't found that to be a problem. There's a number of folks out there that agree with me, but I wouldn't say that I know the full science behind that.
Excellent, excellent. So I want to respect all of your time, and I really appreciate all of that great insight and information, Kirby. Thank you so much. Again, we want to thank our sponsors, Chelsea Green and Ward's Nursery. From everyone at NOFA Mass, thank you, and we look forward to seeing you next time.